Hi, my name is Ethan. I am an instructor with the Artesian Alliance, which is the Cheehaw Park and Zoo, the Flint River Aquarium, and the Thronatisca Heritage Center here in Albany, Georgia. And today, I want to talk to you guys about one of my favorite kinds of animals, invertebrates. Now, whenever I say invertebrate, what I mean is that it doesn't have a backbone. That is what makes an invertebrate an invertebrate. So we are vertebrates. We have a backbone. We got our backbone right here on our back. Um, your cat or your dog is an example of a vertebrate. If you've got a pet snake, that's a vertebrate as well. Anything that has bones, specifically a backbone, is a vertebrate, and anything that doesn't is an invertebrate. So whenever I say an invertebrate, I mean things like bugs and maybe some other stuff like sea stars and squids and other creatures like that that don't have bones. Um, so um, I thought the best way to figure out what is and is not an invertebrate is to show you guys a bunch of examples, and we can figure out which ones are vertebrates or which ones are invertebrates and why. Um, so I think to start, I've got a lot of animals here. Most of them are dead. So they are preserved as biofacts. They are creatures that were once alive that died, and now we keep them to show to you guys. So don't get, I know sometimes with invertebrates, especially bugs and other creepy crawlies, people get a little squeamish, but don't be squeamish. Um, uh, It'll be all right. So I think to start, I'm going to show off what I think is one of the prettiest invertebrates. We have this guy right here. Um, Check him out, or her. I don't really know whether or not it's a boy or a girl. Um, you see how big? Like this is my hand, and this is how big it is. It's a very, very big. This is an Atlas moth. Um, and they are extremely pretty, right? Um, so this is an example of an invertebrate. This is an insect. Insects um, are very specific kinds of invertebrates. They have uh, 6 legs, 3 body segments, special mouth parts, little things that help them eat. We have lips, but they have things called mandibles, which help them out there. And they have antenna, which these ones are really fuzzy, as you can see here. And I actually know a song that helps you identify insects that I want to teach you guys. But in order to do it, I kind of need to stand up. So it goes to the tune of head, shoulders, knees, and toes, okay? So it is head, thorax, abdomen, and 6 legs. See, I've got the 6 legs sticking out there. Head, thorax, abdomen, and 6 legs, antennas, mouth parts, compound eyes, head, thorax, abdomen, and 6 legs. So you guys can try that out, and maybe you'll remember it a little bit better. I know that's how I always remember it. So every insect is going to have 3 body parts: a head, an abdomen, and a thorax. And they're always going to have 6 legs. And they have antenna, they have mandibles, little mouth parts, and they have compound eyes. And you can remember it with that song that I just sang for you. So this is an insect, and I'm going to show you a few other insects here as well. This guy, if you get there's a little bit of glare, but it's kind of hard to see. But this guy is a grasshopper. This is a grasshopper in here, a very large grasshopper. It is known as a lubber grasshopper. That's what it says on the lid, at least. And these guys If you've ever seen a grasshopper, what do grasshoppers do? They sit on grass and then they hop. That's why they're called grasshoppers. And they've got these big back legs, and they spring forward with their big back legs, and they land on pieces of grass, and then they munch on that grass, and then they'll move on to another piece. So what kind of creature is a grasshopper? Well, we know it's an invertebrate because it doesn't have a spine or anything. It doesn't have a backbone. So if we take a real close look, we can see that it has a head, and then it's kind of hard to tell, but it does have an abdomen here, like its middle part here, and then it's got a big thorax in the back. That's its big butt right over there. So head, abdomen, thorax, and then let's count the legs. Let's see, what's the best angle for you guys to count the legs? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3 here on the back, on one side, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 here on the front side. So it's got 6 legs, and then we take a close look, and we see that it has antenna. It has an antenna sticking out right there. And it's got little mouth parts that you're probably not going to be able to see. And it does have those compound eyes. Now, whenever I say compound eyes, you ever seen like a fly's eyes? There's all those little spots on them that help them to see. So this guy's got a head, thorax, and abdomen. So it's got those 3 body parts. It's got 6 legs. So we're good so far. It's got antenna. It's got mouth parts. And it's got compound eyes. So it's an insect. Great. So we know that that one's an insect. Here's a bunch more examples of some insects, and one that's not an insect that has kind of fallen apart in the center there. So we've got a cicada over here. You actually are probably going to hear them this year if you live in Georgia, because a 17-year brood is about to come out. Cicadas, as babies, they will burrow under the ground near trees, and then whenever they become adults, they'll climb up into the tree, they'll shed their skin, and they'll fly away, and they'll make this really loud buzzing noise to attract mates. And some of them will stay underground for 17 years. Can you imagine if you slept under the ground for 17 years? You'd be crazy. Your parents would probably get really upset. There's a couple beetles in here. Those are all also insects. So like this one over here, you can see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 legs. It's got a head, an abdomen, and a thorax. It's got antenna, it's got mouth parts, and if we get real close, we can see its compound eyes. So beetles are also insects. Now there's one creature that kind of fell apart down here that is not an insect. It is a scorpion. Scorpions aren't insects, but they are invertebrates. Scorpions are arachnids. And arachnids are things like scorpions and spiders. And I actually have an example of a dead spider here. It is dead. Don't worry. It's not crawling around. This is a really, really big tarantula. It's actually a Goliath bird-eating tarantula. Now, don't worry. They're not found around here. They're found in South America. But these guys are so big that they can even eat birds, which is kind of crazy. Since we're talking about tarantulas, I actually have the one living specimen we're going to look at today is a tarantula. It is right over here. So I'm going to use this book to give you guys a better view of the tarantula. So tarantulas are arachnids. So arachnids are different from insects. Insects have 6 legs. Arachnids have 8. Arachnids also only have 2 body segments. So it's got this head here, and then it's got what's called a cephalothorax, which is just its back part there. And as you can see, it's crawling around. This is a rose-haired tarantula. They are very pretty, in my opinion. But what they'll do is they will they will flick hairs if they think there's a threat. And these little hairs are really irritating if you get them on you. They are very, very irritating. And here this one is crawling around. They're not very pleasant. Um, um, we don't touch her, obviously. We don't handle her because, you know, she could bite. She actually has very large fangs. They don't do a lot of damage, these fangs. They're not really that dangerous to people, but it's kind of hard to tell. But she's got some very big fangs right there. And I got a question saying, um, can it bite you? It can. It probably won't, but it can. Um, uh, these guys are probably best left look at and to appreciate, but not to pick up. Um, so you can see all the hairs. I got another question saying, is it soft? They're kind of soft. So arachnids are a type of arthropod. An arthropod means joint foot, which is kind of a weird name for something. Why would you name something joint foot? Well, the reason why is because they've got joints and they've got feet. So they've got an exoskeleton, which is a way of saying, you know how your bones are on the inside of your body? Well, their bones are on the outside of their body. They keep this shape, so they're actually kind of stiff and hard and crunchy. But this one, if you kind of rubbed her, it would be soft. But I wouldn't do it if I were you because she could bite you. She could flick those hairs at you, and whenever those hairs get on you, it's like a cactus. It'll just hurt a lot. So that is our tarantula. So we're going to talk about a few other kinds of creatures as well here. So far, we've talked about insects, which have 6 legs, 3 body parts, a head, an abdomen, and a thorax, and antenna, mouth parts, and compound eyes. Arachnids have 8 legs, 2 body parts. They have simple eyes, so they don't have those fancy big compound eyes that can see in all directions at once. Instead, they just have a bunch of eyes all over their head. This one, it would be very hard for me to show you, but this one has a couple eyes. I don't know exactly how many, but they're all clustered right on the top of her head there. Arachnids, spiders specifically, are all capable of producing silk, which is that thing that they make spider webs with. Comes right out of their butt. They just make that silk with their butt. So let's talk about a few more kinds of arthropods. So another example of an arthropod, which, as I said before, are invertebrates with shells. So they've got an outer casing around them. So insects have that hard, crunchy casing. Spiders and scorpions have that hard, crunchy casing. In here, I have a millipede. Millipedes also have a hard, crunchy casing. They are also an arthropod. You might find millipedes in your yard. Millipedes are have a whole bunch of legs. In case you didn't notice, all these legs running down it. Millipedes have 4 legs per body segment. Centipedes only have 2 legs per body segment, 1 on either side. Millipedes have 4, 2 on each side. Millipedes are what's called detritivores, which is a fancy way of saying that they eat dead things. They eat leaves, dead leaves. They eat dead bugs. They eat pretty much anything dead that they come across. And they break it down, and then they poop out dirt, and that dirt becomes good soil. And so we can use it for soil. Millipedes are very, very nice. They really can't hurt you. They don't have claws or jaws or anything fancy like that. They just pick up leaves and munch on them all day. Centipedes, though, centipedes are predators. They hunt down other animals, and then they've got these two very specialized legs at the front that they just stab creatures with and then eat them. So you should, but the way to figure out if something's a centipede or a millipede is millipedes have this very round body, and they have 4 legs per body segment, whereas centipedes only have 1 leg per body segment, and their bodies tend to be really flat. This is an African black millipede. It is a giant millipede. As you can see, it's very large. It is probably probably a little less than a foot large. This one, it's like 10 inches maybe. We have centipedes in the United States, the Texas red-bellied centipede, that are 14 inches long. Whew, that's like it's like about this long. Can you imagine a centipede this long? They're pretty crazy. So we've talked about insects. We've talked about arachnids. We've talked about some other arthropods like millipedes. Now let's talk about the last group of arthropods that I want to talk about with you guys. Crustaceans. You guys ever heard of a crustacean before? It's things like crabs and lobsters. Crabs are crustaceans, lobsters are crustaceans, crayfish are crustaceans. I have a very white crayfish here, but you might be able to find these guys in freshwater streams. They hang out in creeks, and they eat anything that pretty much comes by them. So they will eat animals, they will eat plants. Whenever they're younger, they tend to eat more plants than animals, but as they get a lot larger and older, they will eat larger things. Crustaceans are always growing. They just grow and grow and grow until they die. They also can regrow these claws that they have. So like if a crab gets its claw stuck somewhere, it can just rip it off and grow a new one after a while. It takes a while, but it can do it. So if you ever see like a crayfish in the water missing a claw, it's all right. It'll regrow the claw. Crayfish scoot by going backwards. That's how they move. And what they do is they've got this tail, and they will just flick it really hard and push the water that way and go flying backwards. So they kind of scoot like that. And what they'll do is they'll hang out kind of halfway underneath a rock in the stream. They will just wait for things to float by like bugs and stuff, and then they will just grab it real quick, pull it in and eat it. And then if they need to, like a larger fish or something comes by, they will scoot away really quickly from behind. So that was a crayfish. I have, this is a much larger crayfish. Yeah, this guy's a lot bigger than the last one. And I also have a spider crab. You might have seen pictures of spider crabs hanging out deep under the ocean. They also are found near the shore, so you might be able to see a spider crab near the shore. They've got these really long spindly legs. They're not crabs, or sorry, they're not spiders. They are crabs. They've got these really spindly legs that they walk around on, and that's why they're called spider crabs. And these guys are saltwater crustaceans. So crayfish live in freshwater, like your stream or your creek or even your pond. These guys like to live in salt water. So they will live in the ocean, or sometimes in an estuary, which is where rivers meet the ocean and the water's still all salty there. They hang out in those kind of places, and they use their front little claws to grab things. They actually have 14 legs, 7 on each side. And they'll use their little claws to grab things and eat them. And they'll scuttle around on the ground. Maybe you've seen some things like blue crabs that scuttle sideways. These guys move backwards. Spider crabs move sideways as well, or forwards. They're kind of weird. but they generally live in water. Crustaceans do, but there are some crustaceans that live on land. You guys ever found roly-polies before? Roly-polies are a crustacean, just like a crab is. They're very closely related to crabs, but they live on land. So we're going to look at a few other kinds of invertebrates now. Which one should I start with? Let's start with this. Can you see what it is? It's a clam. This is a razor clam. And you can find them on the beach. They live in salt water. They've got this casing around them, and they will open it up, and that's where their body is. Clams are a type of gastropod. And gastropod means it means stomach foot. And the reason why they're called stomach foot is because they stick out this big foot from their shell. And whenever I say foot, I don't mean like a human foot. I mean like a big old glob of mucus, basically. And they will grab hold of whatever it is that they find, and then they will pull it in, and their foot also acts like their stomach does. And they'll digest it and eat it using their foot, their big foot, which looks a lot like a tongue. It looks like a big tongue, and it'll grab hold and eat stuff. Other examples of gastropods are snails. So if you've ever seen a snail, that is also a gastropod. It'll use its big foot, which is just its whole body, and it will grab hold of things, and it'll bring it up to its mouth, and it'll use its mouth to eat. Other examples are things like whelks and conchs, which are those big shells that you see on the beach. And all of these guys, they have this hard shell on the outside and a soft shell on the inside. And these guys are actually mollusks. Okay, let's see. What else can I show you guys? Ooh, here's kind of an interesting one that maybe you didn't think of. It's a little murky, the water is, but this is a sea star. Maybe you can see it a little bit better if I... Yeah, maybe a little bit. You can see it. Can you see it? The water's a little murky. These guys are preserved in alcohol, by the way. Alcohol keeps the body together, which is why they're preserved in it. It's not just water. Water would make it kind of get gross and spongy. So sea stars are echinoderms, which is just a very broad group of creatures. Sea stars have 5 limbs, as you can see. And they live really close to the shore. They live in shallow areas, and what they'll do is their mouth is right there on the backside, right in the center, and they'll use their mouth. They'll use their 5 legs, and they'll just slowly waddle across the ocean floor, and they will just pick things up with their mouth and eat it just right into their bodies. And what's actually really weird is if you cut off one of the limbs, a new limb will grow, and that old limb might grow an entirely new sea star. So you might be able to make 2 sea stars out of 1 sea star, which is really crazy. You might have found dead sea stars on the beach. Those are all dried up and they're all hard, but in real life, sea stars are generally kind of squishy, but they do have that hard shell around them. They use that hard shell for protection, and whenever they dry out, they look like what we see in gift shops and stuff today. They've got all kinds of little hairs. It'll be really hard to see, but they've got all kinds of little grubby kind of grabbers on their limbs. So it's almost like every one of their hands has a million small hands along it. And that's what they use to grab and to feel, because they don't have eyes. They don't have any sort of way of being able to identify anything except through feel. Can you imagine if all you had was feel? You couldn't hear, you couldn't see, you couldn't smell. You probably couldn't taste. You just used your hands to feel everything. Um, that's how sea stars work. And then I also have, this is, I think, my last example of an invertebrate. It's a squid. See the squid? Squids are called cephalopods, which means head foot. And the reason why is because their head's all the way down here and their legs are attached to their head. If we were a cephalopod, our bodies would be on top of our head and our limbs, like our arms and legs, would be attached to our faces. It'd be kind of weird. Um, these guys swim around under the water, and other things that are cephalopods are things like octopuses. Octopuses are cephalopods. Um, Squids have all of these little speckles on them, and these little speckles actually help them change color. They can expand them or contract them and make them smaller. So they can either make them bigger or make them smaller to change their color. So right now, this one's kind of pale, but if it wants to be, it can turn this deep red color, which will make it really hard to spot. And another thing that squids do is eject ink. And so if they're swimming along and a bigger fish is coming, what they'll do is they will shoot forward. And whenever they shoot forward, they'll leave this ink behind. And the ink doesn't act as a smoke screen. It doesn't make it impossible for the fish to find the squid. What it does is it's almost like a decoy. It's a little fake squid. So you've got this little black inky cloud that looks vaguely like a squid. And this big fish that's coming along, it's not going to know the difference. It sees a squid here 1 second and then a little black blob here the next. It's already coming in for the chomp, and it chomps down and it just eats ink instead of the actual squid. So these guys don't have backbones, which is what makes them invertebrates. But they are technically mollusks, which I said mollusks before are things like this guy, this clam here. A clam is a mollusk, and a mollusk has a hard shell but a soft body. So where's the squid's hard shell? It actually is inside of the squid. It's got this really long shell, this really long thin shell that runs down the inside of it, called a pen, because it kind of looks like a pen. And I always like to imagine old-timey sailors catching a squid, pulling that pen out and then dipping it in the squid ink and writing stuff down with it. So squids are like their own personal little writing utensil. They live down under the water, and they use these little suction cup arms. Cephalopods have these hands with all these suction cups on them, and they use these suction cups to grab hold of things and to bring it close to their mouth, which is right inside. You can actually see it right there in between all of its stuff is its beak. It has a beak, and it uses it to chomp on other animals that it grabs. So those are all of the invertebrates that I have. As you can tell, there are a lot of different kinds. They actually make up 95% of all animals on the planet are invertebrates. 95%. That's a lot. So they're just everywhere. Ants, spiders, crabs, butterflies, just about everything that I said here. There are tons of them all over the place. So I think that they're just a very cool thing to learn about. So in review, invertebrate means no backbone. They don't have a skeleton, at least not one on the inside. So there are a bunch of different kinds, things like bugs, spiders, creepy crawlies, crabs, and even things like, even softer things like squids and octopus and jellyfish are an example of an invertebrate as well. So I hope you guys learned something here, and if I have any more questions, I will answer them now, but if not, let's just wait a second and see. Any questions? All right. In that case, thank you guys for coming, and I hope you have a good day.